you are now the performers, let's say, or agents. What we've been doing for 15 years with the Topological Media Lab is to take very seriously this idea that maybe we could imbue maybe hybrid media, hybrid between stuff you can touch and stuff you see or hear, with properties that are sort of like physical stuff, but has some magic properties. So, for example, if I switch from the camera to density. Please try do something. Okay, so basically, we can think of the air. So what's interesting is to think of the air between you. What would it be like if the air between you were live? Okay, can't talk and drive at the same time. Try to do that under pressure and cursor. Here we go. That's it. Okay. And to start with something more familiar, perhaps, like that. This is what you were, like this, or like this. You stay still and then try to move. I'm going to do one more very familiar piece. Okay. In other words, what would happen if the boundary between where your body ends and where the world begins becomes a question? Okay? So that would be kind of a beginning of what I wanted to talk about briefly tonight. Okay? Too bad we don't have time to play with this, but I'll just quit that. Okay, there's a lot more to do with that. Okay. So, starting point. Me, myself, or we. Okay. So this is the classical beginning of, let's say, the modern era, Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. Okay. Well, the question I would like to pose is this all there is to it? To empathy? Of course, we've already heard the answer is no. Okay. So we go from, if we question this idea of the Homo sapiens rex, okay, we talk about self and other. That's typical, right? So, but the typical way we think about self, or sociologists and scientists and artists talk about self and other these days, is with the tropes of computer science, this idea of the graph. Or you think about maybe relationships between people, but it's still a graph, okay? It's still self and others like myself. But is that the only kind of self there is? Now here I need a piece of paper. Usually, okay, you think of self, there's me. Think of other selves, there's more things like me, okay? But here's another way to think about other. Here's me. What's the other to me? What is the other to me? This is a real question, not rhetorical. It's a whole paper. Right? The other to me is not just others like me, it's the whole universe. So it's a much more profound question then, just to say self and other. So the question might be something like this. Could there ever, I've been asking this question for quite a while. What would it mean to ask? Could there be an art that's not made by humans and not for humans? What would that be? And ask the same question for science, for technology, for Earth. What would it mean to have Earth not for us, not made by us? Okay? So this, for 15 years with the Topological Media Lab, many artists and scientists and philosophers and writers, we've been very, very lucky to work together with this kind of question. I've been asking art students and scientists, okay, what would it mean to do what you're doing but not by us and not for us? So maybe the three terms might be important to keep in mind for this kind of work will be coming from two of them come from the Latin word for expediti, which means to try, to experiment, and to experience. Okay? So that's nice because it gives you roots for two different words, experiment and experience. And what I won't talk about too much tonight is the how, right? Because there's a lot to say. But the key word for that might be abductive methods, or you can call it like Sherlock Holmes. We change our hypotheses, we invent hypotheses as we go. It's not we freeze ahead of time. Here's the phenomenon, here's the object study, here are the techniques, here's the methodology, which I write in my grant proposal, right? And here's the results I'm going to get. But instead, Sherlock Holmes, just look at Sherlock Holmes, okay? In fact, mathematicians work like this. Mathematicians work at this because mathematicians, we do proofs, indubitable truth, right? And yet we're allowed to play with the assumptions. That's the art and poetry of mathematics. Now, the word play is very important. Experiment for us would be putting things in play. And not assume that we know what our starting point is. Can I put this here?
Yep.
Okay. Not assume that we know what a language is. Not assume we know what body is. Not assume we know what objects are. And not even assume we know what matter is. Physics, right? Doesn't assume that. So what's really interesting is to think about the work the scientists do is very much a matter of an acts of imagination. What if things were other than they are today? Or rather, what if things are other than I think they are today? What could it possibly be? Framed in that way, it becomes a very, very much a poetic exercise. Best part. Please. So the question is, what is an instrument? What is a gesture? What is an eggplant? Right? So if we allow ourselves to not assume we know what we think we know, right, indubitably, but we can play with everything, every concept, every method. There's a lot of mathematics behind that, a lot of signal processing, a lot of tabla technique, he's a musician as well, a lot of acoustic science, etc. that's going on. Then we have a lot of expertise. We can play with that. I'm going to skip the next part for lack of time. Skip the next one. Okay. This one I should. This is what is light. What is matter? Can you bring the sound down, please? Bring the sound down. I'll talk over this. In this case, we put 13 tons of sand on the floor of a black box in order to destabilize, to defamiliarize the ground, because we don't normally think of the ground as something as a question, but we want to make the ground itself a question. Okay, so we walk onto this floor, you feel sand. You don't expect to feel sand normally if you're going to a black box like that. So it defamiliarizes even the earth underneath your feet. And then we can, when people throw sand into the air, the motion of the sand becomes optical flow, and the optical flow becomes light, and light is projected back onto the sand. So it's not that bodies are light, motion of sand is light, which makes light a poetic figure. Okay, now, some of the things we learned along the way, talk about experimentation. Any performer, any choreographer, any director will tell us, right? It's obvious that there's a world of difference between thinking of the world, designing the world as flat things on walls or on screens, and designing live event. But here's a very simple example. I'm going to go into this detail because it's essential to understand that live experience is is crucial. The video artist here, okay, he designed his work to be light objects on dark background because it looks better that way on the screen. I said, please, Jerome, invert it. I knew what was going to happen, but he refused. And he said, okay, please do it, just do it. Okay, so he did it, inverted black on white. When the images were white on dark on the floor, everybody was looking down because it's so entrancing, so enchanting. Everybody's just like this, looking down. The second he inverted it, everybody started looking at each other. This whole experiment was about sociality, about thickening potential for social engagement with each other. All right? So why do you think they did that? Well, it's a very simple reason. The ground is light. The light bounces off the bodies. We become visible to each other. Trivial, right? But not so trivial. Because this is a phenomenological truth, not a cognitive thing. Okay. Now we go to these questions of, well, what are the fundamental qualities of perception? Kant, right? But if we put everything in play, even space and geometry become questions, even time become questions. So our current work not from TML, but now in ASU, colleagues of Liz, we're thinking about how can we expand from these kinds of phenomenological experiments to looking at some more fundamental questions, like the question of the sense of time. Not time as abstraction, but your sense of time. And everybody's sense of time is different. Think about it. This is a famous example from Bergson. In the morning, I drink tea, hot tea, but I don't use sugar. If you use sugar, like a proper British person, you take a spoon of sugar, put it in the tea, stir. How long does it take to melt? How long does it take? Well, this is a rhetorical question. How long it takes? Well, it's of course, it might take the same number of seconds every single morning because you make it the same way, same amount of tea. But how long it appears to take depends on how busy you are, right? Are you sick? Are you healthy? Are you in a hurry? Right? So in other words, the duration, the felt experience of time is a function of physics and expectation, right? And physiology. Here's another example. The next example I'm going to show you is a much more expanded view of this, where instead of using time from a clock or a computer, we drove the whole event from the flicker of a candle. So you're going to hear that, and you hear a little performance, but it's performed not by a human, but by a candle and synthetic processes. This will be sound. One sound. Okay. Should be sound, yeah. Okay, click. Listen to it. Listen to the breathing. At some point, the room is going to inhale and exhale. And when it exhales, she's going to finish the event. Now I'm going to breathe in, breathe out. I did this question in Spain. I asked a group of students, "Will somebody have a cigarette?" In Spain, you can do this, and they lit it. Okay, and in the room, somebody lit a cigarette in the front. And I asked other people in the room, "Raise your hand when you can smell the smoke." Okay, I wish I could do that. I don't smoke. Okay, And of course, people in the front, raise their hands first, and then later, further and further off, okay? The question is, where is the smoke? Where is the smoke? Well, this is a rhetorical question. So, well, there's physics, where the particles and all that kind of stuff. It's also your physiology. Do I have a stuffy nose today? Do you have a stuffy nose today? Or do you understand my question? I spoke it in English. Or if I didn't ask the question, would you have smelled it much later because you weren't prepared to smell the smoke? Or are you lying? Are you pretending to smell it and raise your hand? You see? In other words, the question, where is the smoke, is a function of physics, of physiology, of expectation. Where do you draw that line? That means the event, the quantum mechanical event, the boundary around we know this already from physics, right? The boundary around the event includes the observer, the observed, and the apparatus of measurement. But if you include reflexivity, that is a subjective condition of the observer, we're entering into much, much more profound stakes. I'm going to finish with that. All right? Because here now, the world comes in, like Karan Barad and other writers have written. The world comes in. You can ask yourself, okay, what plays a role in this sense of what is an event, right, or something that you can measure, okay? Isaac Newton was the first physicist, right, the first modern physicist, but he was also the last alchemist. Alchemy formed a great part of his practice. To modernize, it seems odd, right? Why should a single human being have this occult and irrational side to it? Akhil Bigrami had a very, very nice essay on Mahatma Gandhi, and looking at, I hope it's mine, okay. Now it's mine, thank you. Whose is it? Sorry, shared. And he said that Gandhi's radicalism traced back, this is Akhil Bigrami's story, traced back actually to the Enlightenment, to the British Enlightenment, to the English Enlightenment. And in Newton's time, the origin of that period, the modern period, there were natural philosophers who agreed with Newton on the equations of the physics, but they differed in a very fundamental way. Is that to them, matter was not brute and inert, to use Newton's famous phrase, but instead, to use Akhil Bigrami's phrase, suffused with value. So, I can take this bottle of water, I'm thirsty, I drink it. I need to wash my car, I don't have a car. I need to wash something, I wash it, okay? I can throw it away if I don't want it, just let it run down the drain. I cannot do that with you, right? I cannot have that relationship with a human being. So if matter was suffused with value, just as we will acknowledge that humans are suffused with value, it follows that there's some sort of ethical relationship, not a practical one, between me and matter. Okay? So that's a question I'll leave us with. What ensues? Thank you very much.